everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's lesson is going to be on parturition, which is a very important topic under human female reproductive system. And it is a process of giving birth to a baby, and in this video lecture I will be discuss you about what is parturition and the reflex of parturition and the hormonal and mechanical control and the various stages of parturition. So watch the video till the end to get all important information regarding this topic. Okay, good luck. So let's move on to our discussion. Parturition. What is parturition? Parturition is the process of giving birth to a baby or the expulsion or the delivery of the fetus from the mother's body, and it occurs at the time of pregnancy. And this process by which the delivery of the fetus takes place, that is called labor or parturition. And the parturition process is influenced by oxytocin and prostaglandin. Oxytocin, which released from posterior pituitary, and prostaglandin, that is released from uterine and placental tissue. And the parturition process, it involves various activities like contraction of uterus, dilation of cervix, and opening of vaginal canal. And the reflex of parturition starts by the full grown fetus and as well as placenta, and that is known as the fetal ejection reflex. So let's talk about fetal ejection reflex. It stimulates the fetus to eject it from the maternal body, and it causes mild contraction of uterus, which stimulate the secretion of oxytocin from the posterior pituitary. So there is a positive feedback mechanism due to the contraction of the uterus, and so there is a positive feedback to release oxytocin from posterior pituitary, and this oxytocin which get released, that causes the stronger contraction of the uterus, and this is a positive feedback for more secretion of oxytocin. So there were already uterine contraction which stimulate the posterior pituitary to release oxytocin, and the further release of oxytocin which releases more oxytocin so that the contraction become more stronger. So there are two type of control that involves in parturition, that are hormonal control of parturition and the mechanical control of parturition. So first I will be discuss about the hormonal control of parturition. And the first point is increased secretion of estrogen and progesterone. So during pregnancy, the secretion of both estrogen and progesterone are very high because both are necessary for maintaining the pregnancy. But in the last 2 to 3 months or the last trimester of the pregnancy, the estrogen secretion becomes 2 to 3 times that the secretion of progesterone. But the progesterone secretion remains same. But the secretion of estrogen is become higher than progesterone secretion. So the question is, what happens in this stage? The progesterone keeps the uterus in minimum contraction stage, but the end of pregnancy there is really need a lot of stronger contraction from the uterine muscle, and that's why estrogen increases and the progesterone secretion decreases, because progesterone prevents the contraction of the uterine muscle, and because there is need to higher contraction of the uterus, so higher level of estrogen that promotes contraction of the uterus, and the secretion of progesterone doesn't decrease, but its secretion remains same. The next hormone which is involved in the process of parturition, that is oxytocin. And oxytocin is formed in hypothalamus and released from the posterior pituitary. And the oxytocin is one of the main hormone which basically control the process of the parturition, because as soon as the contraction starts in the uterus, the secretion of oxytocin increase. So the uterine contraction stimulates the release of oxytocin, and when oxytocin increase, there is a positive feedback mechanism, and so when there is stronger contraction, more oxytocin is released, and if there is more oxytocin released, then again it causes much more contraction of the uterine muscle. So it causes contraction of smooth muscle, of the uterus, and that enhances the labor. So the number of oxytocin receptors increases in the wall of the uterus by the influence of estrogen. Because of this, uterus become more sensitive to oxytocin, and oxytocin also stimulates the release of prostaglandin. So oxytocin also stimulates the release of prostaglandin from the decidua, and the increases of oxytocin is due to neuroendocrine reflex. So during the movement of fetus through cervix, the receptors on the cervix are stimulated and starts discharging a large number of impulses, and the impulses are carried to the hypothalamus by the somatic nerve fibers, and that results in the release of a large quantity of oxytocin, which enhances the labor. And the next hormone which involves in the process of parturition is relaxin. Relaxin is secreted from the maternal ovary and during the initial period of pregnancy, and it is secreted in large quantity of parturition or at the time of labor by placenta and mammary glands. Relaxin helps labor by softening the cervix and loosening the ligaments of symphysis pubis, so that the dilation of cervix occurs, and it also increases the number of receptors for oxytocin in the myometrium, and simultaneously suppresses the inhibitory action of progesterone on uterine contraction, so that the uterus contracting, and it facilitates the development of mammary glands also. The next hormone is prostaglandin. In recent times, prostaglandin are considered to play a vital role in labor, and it facilitates labor by increasing the force of uterine contraction, and it is secreted from uterine tissue, fetal membrane and placenta. And their concentration is increased in maternal blood and amniotic fluid at the time of labor, and prostaglandin increases the forces of contraction and by elevating the intracellular concentration of calcium ions and in the uterine muscle. The next is catecholamine. It is believed that the circulating adrenaline and noradrenaline also might increases the uterine contraction through alpha adrenergic receptor. And the next is cortisol. At the time of labor, hypothalamus releases a large quantity of corticotropin releasing hormone, which increases the release of cortisol from adrenal cortex, and cortisol enhances the uterine contraction and play an important role in helping the mother to withstand the stressing during labor. The next is hormones from the fetus. Fetus also produces some hormones like fetal oxytocin, cortisol and prostaglandin, which also increases the rate of peristalsis to help in stronger contraction of the uterus. Next is the mechanical control of parturition. So there is mechanical control which also involves in the process of parturition, and these are of two types, that the stretching of uterine muscle and the scratch in the cervical mucosa. So in the stretching of uterine muscle, the smooth muscles of uterus, they can cause contraction in the uterus, and generally there are stronger contraction in the smooth muscles that causes the stretching of the uterus. Then the second type of mechanical control, that is the scratch in cervical mucosa. So continuous scratching in the cervical mucosa that also lead to the stronger contraction in the uterine muscle. Next, we move on to the stages of the parturition. So there is 3 stages that involves in the process of parturition, and they are the dilation stage, the expulsion stage, and the placental stage. So in the dilation stage, at the time of parturition, the uterus begins to contract about 4 to 6 hours before the parturition begins. And this contraction, they occurs in every 30 minutes. As the time passes, this contraction become more stronger and they begin to occur more frequency, and the amniotic sac, it ruptures and the amniotic fluid comes out, and the head of the baby, it puts pressure on the cervical mucosa, so the uterus and the cervix and the vagina dilate, so the baby is able to come out. So in this stage, contractions occur 4 to 6 hours before parturition, and it occurs for every 30 minutes, and with the time passes away, the contraction become more stronger. So the second stage is the expulsion stage. During this stage, baby is delivered out from the mother's uterus, and it takes about 10 to 60 minutes. And head comes out first, and then buttocks comes out. And eventually the lungs expands and the circulatory system, it also begins to function. And then the last and the third stage, that is placental stage. So after the expulsion of the fetus from the placenta and decidua comes out, and these stages takes about 15 to 30 minutes after the delivery of the baby, and there is very little bleeding in the placental stage because the vessels of the uterus, they get constricted, so bleeding is not much, but in placental stage the placenta and decidua are taken out. So this was all about the process of parturition which I have discussed to you. And thank you for watching the video till the end. If you like this video lecture, then please like, share and subscribe my channel. Okay, thank you and good luck.